Hello everybody, welcome back to Katia Plant Scientist's Painted Mountain Corn Patch. What we have here is we have both the corn tassels, which are the male reproductive part of the plant, and now we have lots of different corn silks. So what's the difference between the corn tassel and the corn silk? The corn tassel contains the pollen, so when it shakes it releases pollen from these different structures here, and the pollen is carried by the wind and hopefully lands on the corn silks. So what are corn silks? Now I know that corn silk kind of almost looks like light colored hair, doesn't it? Almost like you'd find on a human or another mammal. But when you touch the corn silks, it does not feel like hair at all. It almost feels like sort of stretchy elastic string is how I would describe it. Corn silks are really interesting because they are the female reproductive part of the plant, and every one of these is a stigma. So stigma is the landing pad of the pollen, and in most plants this is just sort of the thing in the center of the flower that looks like a little landing pad, often on a stalk. Now in the case of corn, every one of these is actually the landing pad at the end of it, and every one of these is the stalk. And each one of these travels all the way back into the corn cob, which is developing here. And each one of these stigmas leads to a corn kernel. See, if you look closely at it, you can see it's kind of got this fuzzy texture, which I assume is for catching pollen. So when a pollen grain from a different individual corn lands on there, it goes shoo, 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 down there, lands on each of these different stigma. Then it fertilizes it. The pollen grain releases a sperm cell that travels all the way through each of these stigma here, like a little highway, back into a corn kernel and fertilizes the corn kernel. This is one of the reasons why some homegrown corn, when you get the corn cob, there are only some kernels and some kernels are missing. This is probably because pollen failed to get onto every one of the different stigmas. Here's a cute ladybird, and we can also see how kind of fuzzy and prickly the ends of the stigma are. So think about it, every one of those leads back to a corn kernel. Now, we've had pretty windy weather here, and most of our corn tassels do have the pollen structures on them. So I'm hoping that there's been enough kind of blowing around and blowing in the wind that pollen has found its way to every one of the corn silks. But nonetheless, you can also take some on your hand or a paintbrush and touch them on there just to see if we can encourage some pollen to find its target. I'd also like to say another interesting thing about the painted mountain corn, which I've introduced in a previous video, is that it's not just one tall structure with the tassel at the top and corn cobs forming. These also shoot from the sides and make these kind of extra stalks, which I haven't really seen in corn before. I think that each one of these is probably going to mature into a fully formed stalk because there's a corn tassel developing here at the end of the stalk. So I wouldn't be surprised if this stalk here ends up with corn cobs and tassels on its sides. Another thing I'd like to highlight with the painted mountain corn is the fascinating genetic diversity. Look at this tassel. It's dark with these light-colored pollen structures. This one is dark with dark-colored pollen structures. Again, this one is all light-colored all the way through. So this goes to show, and also the corn silks too, like these corn silks are this beautiful rosy red. Whereas this one is more of a kind of blonde color, almost like blonde hair, right? And others are kind of just a pure white. So this goes to show the fascinating genetic diversity and variability of painted mountain corn. This is due to genes controlling the production of the purple pigment anthocyanin. So all of this reddish and purplish stuff is caused by the plant pigment anthocyanin. I am very excited to see what the corn cobs look like, and I will be keeping all of you plant lovers up to date about the life cycle of the incredible painted mountain corn. Stay curious about plants, everybody, and happy gardening. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Katia Plant Scientist's Painted Mountain Corn Patch. So here, as we can see, the corn are here in early to mid-July, and they have gone through a lot of development since our last check-in with them. We have quite a few corn tassels, which are the male reproductive parts bearing the pollen on the tops of the stalks. Something that I think is quite encouraging is that the side stalks, remember I mentioned these sort of side shoots that they made? They are indeed forming whole reproductive structures with the tassel, and presumably we're going to get ears of corn on the side. That's pretty amazing, because that means that not only do we have the main tassel with its large and impressive ears of corn that look like rocket ships here, we may also get a whole other round of corn on these. So each corn plant could yield something like 8 ears of corn. Something that we note with the earlier ears of corn is look at the silks. They no longer look blonde and silky. They look kind of brown and dried up, and that signifies that yes, they've been successfully pollinated and that the ears of corn are now developing here inside the leaves that wrap them up. We also have some new ears of corn developing down here that have the fresh, pale colored silks, which are going to get fertilized from pollen from the new tassels. So that's all coming together nicely. But we also have some kind of interesting biological oddities in this corn. For example, we have some tops of these corn stalks that blend both tassel and ears of corn. So this looks like both the male and the female reproductive structures combined here. This is a very interesting phenomenon, and it's something I'd like to research a little bit more to see if this is a normal occurrence in this type of corn. But it shows how the idea of biological sex and gender in nature is a good deal more complex than we give it credit for. I think what may have happened is maybe the corn started developing an ear and then decided to switch to a tassel. Often with plants, these kind of reproductive choices are made based off what nutrition and resources they have. So perhaps the corn decided it was a better use of its resources to make a tassel, which is less investment than an ear of corn. Thank you for joining me, and stay curious about plants.